All right, let's get started. You are here for the information session or the how to apply session for the creativity grant. Specifically, we're going to be going over project-based support and our what we're calling the implementation grant this year, which is a new type or title for the creativity grant for project-based support. My name is Emily Sollenberger. I'm a program director for art services at the State Arts Council, joined by my colleague Laura Weiss. And we both are going to be kind of sharing the space today, going through the slide deck and the information ahead. As a reminder, just keep yourself on mute if you're not already there, and we'll hold for some time at the end of the session to go through Q&A, and we'll send some reminders throughout today's presentation about that too. But before we get started, we're going to get going with some grounding slides. So if you're not as familiar with Google Meet as we are here at the State Arts Council, here's a quick reference shot of kind of the tools that you might see on your screen. If you're on a laptop or computer, most of your tools are going to be at the bottom center of your screen. So just be mindful of that microphone button for to speak or keep yourself on mute. As mentioned, there's the camera button. If you need closed captioning, the two C's with the box around it, you can click that for closed captioning. Reactions if you'd like. There's a raise hand feature. So again, once we get to the Q&A session at the end of today, if we have some time, you can utilize that raise hand feature, which is the hand, and we can call on you to vocalize your question or comment, and then just be mindful of that red end call button. If you hit that by mistake, that's okay. Just click the link that you had joined and you'll pick right back up to where we are. Additionally, you have access to a chat feature along with some other tools here towards the bottom right of your screen. If you're on a mobile device, it might be a little bit different, but the chat feature is a box with 3 lines in it. That is it's a public chat. So with other platforms, there are opportunities for private messages and other ways to chat folks. For Google Meet, it is all public. So if you type something in the chat, question, comment, everybody will be able to see that. So just be mindful of that chat feature and feel free to utilize that throughout today's session. If you do have a question or comment along the way, we will try to get to those as we can, or we will answer them at the end. We also use a series of grounding documents before we start our public meetings as well. So I'm going to read the next couple of slides aloud for accessibility purposes. The first is our land acknowledgement statement. And that's, we acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples, the Accahonac Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Chopticco Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nasu-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Yakagani River Band of Shawnee, and the tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right in land and waterways to heal so that they continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. Next is our equity and justice statement, and that's the arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council and our supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. Additionally, the Maryland State Arts Council plays an essential role in ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And we do this through our mission, which advances the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all the people of Maryland. And the last 3 slides, if you're interested in more information, you can find more details on our website, msac.org. Additionally, the 5 goals that are bolded here on the screen are in connection to the State Arts Council strategic plan that was developed back in 2019. We're at the very tail end of this particular strategic plan because we are also in process of developing a new strategic plan moving forward. So we'll have more details on that particular process and the new strategic plan. But if you're interested in reading a little bit more about our strategic plan and implementation, you can also go to the website for more details. But I'm going to read these 5 goals that are bolded here aloud. Goal 1 is to increase participation. Goal 2 is to provide intentional support. Goal 3 is to build capacity. Goal 4 is to leverage connections. And goal 5 is to bolster Maryland arts. And sessions just like this are really in connection to that goal 2 of providing intentional support. We also like to keep in mind these creative meeting actions that you'll see on the screen when we're holding public meetings like this or information sessions, just to keep these things in mind as we move forward through the next hour and being together in this space. So we ask that you celebrate being in the space with other creative people, engage with everyone's presence as a gift, acknowledge that together we know a lot, enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, share your idea and trust that it will be heard, use I statements, focus your language on the task at hand, hold one another accountable with care, apply the idea of yes and, I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it, and balance your speaking and listening. The next couple of slides are just informational so you all are aware of some of our offerings. Many of them fall under our professional development offerings, just like today's session. You can find a lot of information on the State Arts Council's Eventbrite page. That's how you signed up for today's session. These are changing throughout the year based on what's going on in our grant programs, what topics you might want to hear, and what's being developed with our team for professional development. Laura just dropped the link to the Eventbrite page in the chat box. So if you want to access that, you can see what's available moving forward. But in particular, we're holding a lot of information sessions right now as we're moving into the next cycle for FY25, our next fiscal year. So you'll see a lot of program-specific information sessions. But we also host other topic-specific sessions around financial management, legal advice, and other things that we hear throughout the year from our constituents across the state. We also are hosting regional office hours in person across the state. We've been doing this for a bit, and we were just in Annapolis last week. We'll be in Carroll County, I believe, in the next couple of weeks and have some other plans of places to be throughout the state. So look out for when the State Arts Council might be coming to a place near you. We also have the Maryland Arts Summit coming up next week. It'll be Thursday and Friday. The State Arts Council will be there and hosting office hours in person on Thursday and Friday during the summit. That is facilitated and run by Maryland Citizens for the Arts. So if you have not signed up already and interested, please go to their website to sign up and get details around the schedule and also signing up for our office hours if you're interested in talking to us in person. Additionally, there's other ways to get involved with the State Arts Council. We rely on a very diverse group of constituents that could include you from across the state to be panelists for our program review, editors when we go through program policy revisions for some of our programs, along with jurors and other ways to support different programming that we have to offer. There is a ways to get involved page on our website, so you can see all the detailed opportunities throughout the year. And I believe there's a schedule of when to expect different calls for some of our programs. But I believe it's every single grant program now has a public panel to review the applications throughout the year. Each program is a little bit different, and the criteria for panelists is a little bit different. So definitely check out that page when calls go out. As a panelist or an editor, you'll get specific training and support from the program director so you know what to do. And another important piece is that you're compensated for your time. And we think it's pretty reasonable compared to where it's been. We've increased it over the past couple of years. So it is a pretty good compensation for the work. Okay, so moving into the actual meat of why we're here, today's agenda, we're going to go over the Creativity Grant Program and the guidelines in more detail. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the project-based support for the Creativity Grant and digging a little bit deeper into the implementation option for project-based support. Along the way, we're going to provide some helpful hints on the application and just going through the process. We'll talk about the monthly review process, the Smart Simple grant platform for a bit, and then if there's time at the end, we'll hold some space for some questions. Okay, so to kind of give a quick overview of the Creativity Grant, the program started about 5 years ago, and it was developed to support activities and operations for our independent artists and smaller organizations across the state. Again, today we're going to focus specifically on project-based support, in particular the implementation option, which is a little bit different, and we'll go into more details about that a little bit later. Additionally, the Creativity Grant was intended to strengthen the vitality and sustainability of our artists and our small organizations to maintain that strong and stable arts infrastructure across the state. And it continues to serve the growing needs of relevant arts projects and collaborations that are coming from you all through the community. Just kind of a brief starting point here of things to keep in mind. And again, we're going to probably repeat some of these things moving forward and go into more detail. But just to keep in mind that the Creativity Grant in general is open to independent artists and our organizations. You have the option of selecting project-based support or general operating if you're an organization. So organizations have the option of choosing project-based support or general operating, where our independent artists, you're only going to have the option to choose project-based support. It's a brief application no matter what option you choose, and we'll go into more details about that too. Grant applications are accepted on a rolling basis throughout the year and reviewed monthly. The fiscal year 25 application cycle is going to open up on July 1st, so just in a couple of weeks, and the application period will go through April 30th of 2025. So you can apply really anytime in that window that it's open, and then applications will be reviewed monthly. And you're eligible to receive one creativity grant per fiscal year. There's some new options and some things we've changed compared to the past couple of years. If you have been familiar or maybe received or applied for a creativity grant in the past, there's actually 3 options now. So there's the general operating support option for our organizations. And now instead of having one option for project-based support, we have 2 options that you would select. You can either select planning grant, which is the newer option. We had a session about that just yesterday, so there's a recording of that if you missed it, and it'll be up on our website. And then there's the project support for implementation grant, and that's what we're focusing on today. There's also new funding amounts for the creativity grants. So general, in the past, it's all of the options have been up to $4,000. Moving into the FY25 cycle, if you're an organization applying for general operating support, you can apply to up to $5,000 now. If you're interested in applying for the planning grant, that new option, you can apply up to $2,000. And then the implementation grant, which is really reflective of the past project-based support, if you've been familiar, is still going to be up to $4,000. Okay, so I'm going to balance my speaking and listening and pass it over to Laura for the next set of slides.
Thank you so much, Emily, and hello, everyone. Great to see you today. So jumping in here to talk about who is eligible for a creativity grant. As Emily said, organizations and independent artists are eligible for the project-based support option of the creativity grant. So if you're an organization, you have to fall under one of the following categories. The first being that you're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and that organization has to be incorporated in Maryland or have a significant physical presence in Maryland. If you don't have your 501c3 nonprofit designation, but you operate with a Model A fiscal sponsorship, we do accept those. Sometimes people have questions about fiscal sponsorships. Generally speaking, if you are fiscally sponsored, you're going to know if you are fiscally sponsored. So if you have that kind of situation where you have that sponsorship, we are able to accept it. It does have to be under the Model A agreement, which the very technical definition of that is that it is a comprehensive sponsorship in which the assets, liabilities, and exempt activities collectively referred to as the project are housed within the fiscal sponsor. So if you have questions about that, if your model is accepted or not accepted, we're happy to talk one-on-one about those situations with you. Additionally, you could be a unit of government, which might include a unit of government under a town, city, county, or state with the capacity to undertake an arts program. You could fall under a college or university, or you could be a school, which could be a public or private school serving students from pre-K all the way through grade 12. For our organizations, this slide really has to do more specifically with the general operating support, but it is also it also makes sense for the project-based support as well. But we're really looking at our smaller organizations. That's really what the Creativity Grant is meant to support. So those organizations would have an allowable income of $50,000 or less, or the organization has more than $50,000, but is not currently receiving any kind of general operating support through one of our other programs, such as the Grants for Organizations program. So you can only be in one program or the other. You can't receive creativity grants and GFO funding, for example. And again, if you fall into that camp, you probably know if you are receiving GFO funding or not. But of course, if you have questions about how that falls within your organization, we're here to help you out with that. Again, only one application per project or program will be considered for funding. So we can't have multiple people from one organization submitting an application for the same project. The organization has to produce or present arts programs, services, or projects that are relevant to its community and are available to the public. And the organization has to have operated as an arts organization or program for one full fiscal year. And you're going to be asked to submit a financial statement with your application. If you are a brand new organization, you're under your first fiscal year, or you just got your 501c3 designation, it can be possible to submit an application specific for project-based support, but we wouldn't be able to do general operating support for you until you have that full year under your belt. So again, if there's questions about where you are, if you're a brand new organization or anything like that, we can talk through what the best options are for you. For independent artists, that really means that you are working without any affiliation to an organization. So as an individual, you must be a Maryland resident, and you also must be 18 years of age or older. You can't be enrolled in any kind of school, so that includes high school, undergrad, or graduate degree programs. Your proposed project or activity that you're submitting through the application has to take place in Maryland. And again, only one application per project will be considered. So if you're working in like a collaborative group or something like that, you can't have multiple artists submitting an application for the same project. What can the Creativity Grant be used for? So the most expenses that are really related to your arts activity are going to be considered eligible under use for the Creativity Grant. This is just a small list, so it is not limited to this, but we frequently see these types of categories in applications, and that would include things like artist fees or stipends, consultant fees, any kind of expenses associated with marketing or promotions, of course, your artistic materials and supplies, any kind of rentals for space or the venue, anything like that. Some equipment, the equipment would really need to be connected directly to the activities. It can't be considered capital. Some things that a creativity grant definitely cannot be used for would include re-granting or scholarships, any kind of capital improvements or the purchase of permanent equipment. Activities that are not open to the public cannot be funded with the creativity grant. Also, activities that are primarily therapeutic in nature are not eligible. The grant cannot support any kind of travel outside of Maryland. However, there is a little asterisk to this one. So if you are applying for the planning grant, which we talked about yesterday, and that recording will be available on our website shortly, the planning grant does have an exception to this and does allow for travel outside of Maryland for any kind of research or development that you need for your project. So that's an exception specific to the planning grant. The implementation side cannot support any kind of travel outside of Maryland. Additionally, the creativity grant cannot support any kind of day-to-day expenses associated with running a for-profit business. And just like any MSAC grant, the funds cannot be used for any kind of political reasons. So no political contributions or lobbying activities or anything to that effect. There's always questions about, is this eligible, is this not eligible? And we can certainly go through any specific scenarios with you. So definitely reach out. We'd love to answer that to make sure that everything is clear in your application before you submit. All right, so digging into the application itself a little bit, as Emily said, we have two major tracks that you would choose from, either general operating support, and again, that's just for organizations, or project-based support. And within the project-based support, you then kind of split again and have two options, either the planning grant, which we talked about yesterday, or the implementation grant. And again, those are available for artists or organizations. No matter which option you pick, the structure of the application is more or less the same. It's got three main narrative questions, generally the same questions, just sort of tailored depending on the track that you select. If you're looking at that project-based support, you're going to focus on one specific project, program, or event proposal. Whereas if you are applying for general operating support, if you're with an organization, that's when you're looking more holistically at the organization and looking at that full year of operations. Organizations would be asked to upload a financial statement in either case, if you're doing project-based or general operating support. But if you're an independent artist, you do not need to worry about this. That's only if you're an organization. So thinking about this new idea of these different tracks of the planning grant versus the implementation grant, we have a couple of questions that might help you, make that decision of, am I more suited for the planning grant or am I more suited for the implementation grant? So these are some things just to sort of keep in the back of your mind as you're thinking about your needs and how you want to apply. So you might really want to think about where you're at in your creative process to start with. If you're in a really early phase of the creative process for your project, then you might be better suited for the planning grant. If you're in a later phase that you're really getting close to that implementation and execution of a project, then you might be better suited for the implementation option. We do really encourage you to think about the scope and the timeline of the overall project when you're thinking about this. So if it's a really big project that's spanning, multi-years, maybe like a big film project or something like that, chances are then you might be looking at different phases of your project, and it might make sense to look at the planning grant first and then later the implementation grant. Whereas if it's a smaller scope, and it's something that's happening maybe in 3 months from now, that scope is much smaller, and it might make sense to just go directly to the implementation because you're about to execute the project. So just thinking about that is an important thing. Also think about, does the current proposal include what we'll call a final product that will be seen or experienced by the public? If it does, if it's, for example, a play, a production that's going to be put on, that's going to be seen by an audience and the public. So that might be better suited then for the implementation grant. If the does the current proposal focus specifically on, again, those beginning steps of a larger project? Is it really looking at research and development and those early phases? Then that's probably going to be better suited for the planning grant. Does the current proposal include plans, I just said this, for research and development or a project that might not be seen or experienced by the public until a later phase? Again, that's probably better suited for the planning grant. So these are just a few examples. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but just, some ideas of what would fit where. So if we're looking at the planning grant, again, that might include proposals that are really specific to research and development. That might include, again, travel outside of Maryland for research and planning purposes. So if you needed to go to California to go to a specific museum to research a specific topic that's going to impact your project, something like that could potentially be eligible through the planning grant. It could also support artist time or an artist stipend for really developing or creating a work that doesn't necessarily have a concrete plan at this point for future exhibition or showing. And it might support something like creating a proof of concept, or if you need to workshop your, whatever it is that you're working on, maybe recording a demo, something like that, that's a smaller part of a larger project, then that's probably going to fit under the planning grant. Examples of the implementation grant, and this would be more similar to how we've used the project-based grant option in the past. It's really looking at those proposals that include that final product that's going to be experienced by the community, by an audience, by the public. And that might include exhibitions, shows, concerts, productions, album recordings, publishing, anything like that, that's going to end with an end result being experienced by the public. Just a couple more things here before we dive into the actual application. It's important to note that a project does not need to receive both a planning grant and an implementation grant. It can receive one or the other, depending on your needs and what you need support for. But it is important to note that a project can receive a planning grant in one fiscal year and an implementation grant in another fiscal year. So just keep in mind, you can only get one creativity grant total in a fiscal year. So you would need to plan that out in terms of when you would be applying to what. If you do receive that planning grant for your early stages, there's no expectation that you're then going to apply later for an implementation grant. If you only need support for that research and development, that's completely fine. You can do that. And it's important to also point out that there's not a benefit to receiving the planning grant that will then help you later necessarily get the implementation grant. They're completely different applications. They're going to be in completely different years. You're not going to somehow get some bonus points in your implementation grant because you got a planning grant. So they're two totally separate tracks, two totally separate applications. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Emily here to dive into the actual application.
Great, thanks, Laura. So as we mentioned, the creativity grant, no matter what track you choose, it is a short application with 3 questions. So, and they're all generally the same type of question. They're just, as Laura mentioned, they're just tailored to the type of application a little bit more clear. So when we're looking at the implementation grant, there's actually 2 parts of the first question. And this has been, one question in the past. We've kind of just broken it out to make it a little bit more clear this year. So there's an A and a B part to this. So the first part we're really asking you to think about is to describe your proposed arts activities, event, or project. And within your response, include specific logistical details of executing your proposed activity. Additionally, within that same section, we're asking you to describe your plans for community engagement, the goals or intended impact of the arts activity on the community, and the geographic area the project will serve. So that's the first section, and an excellent to outstanding response that's directly connected to the scoring rubric is also below in italics. So you can see what an excellent to outstanding response would include: a clear and specific and thorough explanation of the artist or organization's proposed arts activity, event, project, and then also a clear and thorough evidence of the goals or intended community impact, including engagement, intention, timeliness, and or inspiration in relation to the defined community needs. So we're really looking at, what is your project, and then how it's implementing or impacting the community and how you're engaging with the community. And some helpful hints along the way we're gonna include here. So when you're thinking about that first section, we really want you to think about all those kind of main questions: the who, what, when, where, and why within that first narrative. Also thinking about, we have public panelists that are reviewing these applications. So they might not have any idea about who you are as an artist or an organization, the community you're serving. So really approaching the narrative as if the reader has no idea what you're proposing, and really giving them the full picture of what you're hoping to do, and any type of background information about yourself as an artist or your organization, your community, that would really help paint that picture of what you're trying to do for somebody who might not have that information already. It's also a helpful exercise if you have a trusted friend or family member or colleague, somebody who might not know much about what you're doing, what your proposal is, and have them read through the draft application before you submit it, and have them, quote unquote, poke holes in it and fill in the blanks where it might be unclear to that person before you hit submit. It's a good exercise to consider with grant writing. The second question is around the timeline. So we ask that you describe the timeline of your proposed arts activity, and within your response, include a detailed schedule of the project, including specific timing as it relates to steps of planning, promotional efforts, expenditure of funds, implementation and execution of events, activities, along with evaluation. And you'll see here in italics what an excellent to outstanding response includes, and that would be clear, specific, and realistic timeline demonstrating a realistic schedule, including specific timing as it relates to the expenditure of funds, planning, promotional efforts, implementation of events, activities, and evaluation. So a helpful hint here when it comes to the timeline is really to include a full timeline and a schedule of the entirety of the project from beginning to end. You might consider, depending on the scope and timeline of your full project, if it's happening in a couple of months, you might consider a weekly timeline or schedule. If it's something that's taking place over the course of, say, 10 months to a year, you might include maybe a monthly listing of what's happening, or another time increment that makes sense for you and your project. But really thinking about specific dates and timeframes that you can share all those steps with the process, and make sure you are including all those steps that involve planning, implementation, execution, and evaluation. And just keeping in mind, we know folks, you might have started the planning process and you might have some of that work already done. It's okay to include some of those planning efforts, so it provides further detail and clarification for those next steps in implementation. So really include that full scope. The third question is around the budget. So we ask that you describe the overall budget for the proposed project, and within your response, include a clear listing of all those projected expenses for the project, sources of income beyond the State Arts Council request, and how the State Arts Council funding would be used. And again, that excellent outstanding response includes a clear, detailed, and realistic financial plan for income and expenses that are tied to the proposed project. And again, another helpful hint here for this section is really to include a clear list that shows those specific line items for all of the planned income and expenses, and a description to how you got to that total, if that makes sense for your project. So, for example, if you're including an artist fee of $500, that little extra bit of description might help clarify some things for the panelists who are reviewing your application. So consider including an hourly rate of, say, $25 an hour for 20 hours, or maybe it's a flat rate that you decided upon with an artist. Say you have multiple artists that you're paying. Tell us how many artists you're planning to pay, and what that split among each of those artists might be. So just that further clarification it might help increase your score. Also keeping in mind that the response for the budget section must be in the context of the narrative. So if you've not applied for a State Arts Council grant before, or the Creativity Grant in particular, there are essentially comment boxes. So you'll be typing into a box to fill out the answer. So we ask that the budget information is all in that particular answer box, rather than attaching a budget or a financial statement for the budget, in lieu of that, or any other links. So really keeping everything in those answer boxes. We also ask that there is an attachment section, and for our independent artists and our organizations, we ask that you provide a completed W-9 form, and then also an electronic signature. The electronic signature is just typing in your name to make sure that that you're authorizing, that everything is true and good moving forward. It's nothing fancy that you have to pull like a time-stamped thing. It's really just typing in. And again, as Laura mentioned earlier, we do ask for a financial statement for our organizations from the previously completed fiscal year. So that would be in the attachment section only for organizations. There's also access to resources and helpful things on our website. We are in the process of updating everything for FY25, so we'll be posting things like the application questions we went over today, and the scoring rubric that's used on the program pages. So look out for those in the next couple of weeks, so that way you have access to all the information in another way beyond just this recording. You'll see it's a spreadsheet that will have the question and the scoring rubric along with it. Okay, and then other things to consider as you're planning out your creativity grant application, that the implementation grant is available up to $4,000. Again, we've said this multiple times, but you can receive one per fiscal year. So our fiscal year is July 1 through June 30. So we refer to the State Arts Council fiscal year when we say that. And creativity grants are what we call an all or nothing grant. So if you're awarded a creativity grant, you will receive the requested amount. So if you ask for $4,000 and you're awarded, you're going to receive the $4,000. We do not offer a percentage or portion of the requested amount. We really want to honor what is being requested in full. Okay. So once you have everything submitted, what we do on our end is we oversee the review process with our panelists. And as mentioned, there's a monthly review process for the creativity grants. So as we mentioned, applications are accepted on a rolling basis, reviewed and awarded on that monthly basis. So in FY25, the application period will be from July 1st, 2024 through April 30th, 2025. So essentially what we do on the last day of the month is we batch the applications that are submitted in that month, and they are then sent to the panel for review in the following month, and then a notification to follow shortly after. So for example, if applications are received in August, so that's anywhere from August 1st through the 31st, we'll pull all of those submitted applications together, send them to panel for review throughout September, and then you could expect a notification by early October. And that same cycle continues throughout the year through April, so that way the final review period would be in May, with a final notification for the fiscal year at the beginning of June. Okay, and then As we've mentioned here, that the applications are reviewed by panelists. New this year is that we're going to have a dedicated group of panelists who are reviewing our general operating track applications, and then another group of panelists that will be dedicated to reviewing the project applications only. So that would include our planning and our implementation grants. In the past, we've had them all mixed up in the same panel that would review both types of applications. So that's just more of an internal FYI for you all that might be curious, that we are splitting them up into two specific groups by those general operating and project tracks. And also a reminder that Laura and I as staff, along with the other State Arts Council staff, we're not the ones that are scoring applications or reviewing applications in full for scoring. It really is that we're helping you all along the way with your applications. We support you as applicants, along with our panelists who are reviewing the applications, but we are not scoring them. We leave that to our panelists to do. And then if you are awarded a creativity grant, first off, we'll say congratulations. As a reminder, again, you're only eligible for that one creativity grant per fiscal year. So once you're awarded in FY25, you are not eligible to apply again in FY26. So if you're somebody who's thinking about that longer term project, and maybe you want to apply for a planning grant for the beginning stage, and then thinking about the implementation grant for the final phase, you would have to split those up between the fiscal years. So just something to continue to think about as you're planning and at the times that you're applying. When you receive that notification email, it'll have you directly go to sign your grant agreement form, which is in Smart Simple, our grant platform. So you would sign that virtually. And then the State Arts Council staff would countersign that and have a fully executed grant agreement form, again, that you can access through Smart Simple. Once that is fully executed, that's when the payment process starts to move forward. And that can take about 6 to 8 weeks from the date of that fully executed grant agreement form. So that's just another thing to keep in mind, that there is a little bit of a longer timeline when it comes to getting that payment once you're awarded. So if you want to, kind of backtrack from there of when you might receive payment, of when to apply, that's just another piece of the process to keep in mind. Additionally, if you are awarded a creativity grant, you will be required to complete a final report. Final report dates are actually split into kind of two groups based on when you apply in the fiscal year. So at the beginning of the fiscal year, if you apply between, say, July and December of 2024, your final report deadline would be August 15th of 2025. If you're somebody who applies between January and April of 2025, so the second half of the fiscal year, your final report deadline would be December 31st of 2025. So that just gives you a little bit more space to make sure you're, doing what you can based on what you said in the application, can finalize those things, and then report out afterwards. Part of the grant agreement form and the final report is that if you're awarded funds as a grantee, you're agreeing to spend or obligate the funds by that final report date. So that means, based on what you said in your budget section and what you're paying for and what you're using the State Arts Council funds for, just ensuring that you're spending that in the allotted time, or that they're committed, essentially, that you have a plan in place to spend those funds by the final report date. I'll also note that if you are awarded, the final report will also be in Smart Simple, and you'll have access to that once you have your fully executed grant agreement form. So once that's up and ready to go, you'll see that in your dashboard of a pending report, and you can click into that and see what's required of you. So if you're thinking about what you need to plan ahead, you have access to that. And it's intended to be pretty short and sweet. So we really want to hear just about any challenges or changes, and of course, the impact that you had in your community. And if you're not awarded, that's okay. We also encourage you to try again. The Creativity Grant over the past couple of years has become a very popular and competitive program. So we do encourage you to not give up and to work with our team, work with Laura and I to make sure that you have a successful application moving forward. And also just to make sure your project is a good fit for the Creativity Grant, you know, and it might be a better fit somewhere else. So just work with us on what you're thinking about from the beginning, middle, and if you're at this point of applying and you got a decline email. What we can also do is provide feedback from the panelists who reviewed your application and send that feedback that includes recommendations and things to consider that is directly connected to the review criteria. So to request this, there is a link in that decline notification email that you'll receive. And that just populates within a list that Laura and I work through throughout the year, and we compile everything together and we would send it directly to you via email. It does take several weeks sometimes to get through the feedback. We do get quite a few requests. So, you know, sometimes it could take 2 weeks, but sometimes depending on the time of year, it could take upwards of 6 weeks at times. So just make sure you allow for several weeks for processing and working with us during kind of the ups and downs of our busy season throughout the year. Okay, I'm going to take a break and pass it over to Laura to go through some frequently asked questions moving forward.
Thanks, Emily. Get a sip of water there. I'm going to run through just a couple of frequently asked questions that we get. We get these a lot, so hopefully this will help just clarify any final details that might be missing for you. The first question, hopefully we've addressed this at this point, but the question is, my project is still in the early planning stage. Can I still apply? Yes, you can definitely apply. We do recommend really looking at those application types and the rubric carefully, because a lot of the scoring is based on very specific specific details and thorough descriptions. So if you're in those early stages, you might be looking at the planning grant. That's a big reason why we developed that this year, is because we often see those types of applications and we didn't really have an outlet for it before. So, you know, if you're in that boat, that might be the best option for you. And of course, you can connect with us to talk about, you know, if that's the right fit or not. Another question that we get often is, I'm looking for funding to support living expenses and I don't have a specific project in mind. Can I apply for the Creativity Grant for this? The answer here is no. The Creativity Grant is really intended for that project-specific support. So the application really has to have details that are associated with a very specific project or proposal to be eligible. If you are an artist, though, who are you're looking for support for day-to-day expenses such as rent or mortgage, groceries, anything like that, there is another program called the Grants for Artists program, and that might be a better fit for you. That program launched about 2 years ago, and there will be more information about what we're offering in FY25 shortly. So definitely keep an eye out for that as well. Another question that we often get is, my project has received previous creativity funding. Can I apply again in a new fiscal year? This one really depends. As we've said a couple of times, a project can only be funded once. However, if there are different phases or iterations of the project, future funding might be possible if the grant would clearly support different expenses. And that might fall again into either the planning or the implementation. So talk to us about that, you know, if there needs to be any kind of clarity, and if you would indeed be eligible for future funding or not. Another question we often see is, I'm eligible and applying for the Professional Development Opportunity Grant. Can I also apply for the Creativity Grant in the same month? And yes, you can. You can apply for and you can receive multiple grants in the same fiscal year from different programs. You could even get them in the same month. So these two programs have two totally different sets of goals and different purposes to support different needs. So you can absolutely apply to both at the same time if you want. Another question we often get is, my project is complete. Can I submit for reimbursement of expenses? No, we cannot support any kind of reimbursement for previously completed projects. So you have to submit an application before the completion of a project to be considered eligible. Something else that we're often asked is, I would like the grant to cover expenses associated with bringing a non-Maryland artist to Maryland. Is this allowed? This is one that it could possibly be allowed. The grant funding, if the grant funding would support a non-Maryland artist, it's really recommended that you share a really clear description as to why this particular artist from outside of Maryland would bring significant value to both your project and to Maryland audiences. This is probably a scenario where we would recommend that you talk with us before you submit anything, just to ensure that it is eligible and to make sure it's really clear in your application. My implementation application includes expenses for earlier planning steps that were not funded through a planning grant. Is that okay? So yes, that is okay. A planning grant, like we've said, is not a requirement to receive implementation support. So an implementation grant should share all of the details and steps to outline how you fully realize your project. And that would, of course, include steps of planning and preparation. If you do not require funding for both of those phases of your project, then you can simply apply directly for the implementation to execute the project and really make that become a reality. If you have questions about that, again, feel free to reach out to us and we can talk more specifically about your project. I think we've covered this a couple times, but just to say it again, I received a planning grant earlier in the fiscal year. Can I apply for an implementation grant later in the same fiscal year? No, you're only eligible for one creativity grant per fiscal year. So if you get planning this year, that means you have to wait until FY26 for implementation. So really think about that when you're making your decision of when to apply and how to apply. Colleen, here's your question that you had in the chat. We get this one a lot. How can I share work samples, letters of support, reviews, other materials like that? So external documents are not considered as part of the review of the creativity grant application. The panelists are only going to be looking at those 3 narrative questions, and they're using that scoring rubric to review your application. So we don't accept any kind of extra materials. And in fact, we like to point out, don't include any important information about your project in links or any kind of other documents, because the panelists, they're not going to click on a link that says, you know, visit my website for more information about this project. So make sure it's all really clearly written in the narrative. Another helpful hint is to apply early. So you are eligible to apply anytime for the creativity grant with the rolling deadline from July through the end of April. But we do encourage you to, whenever possible, apply early and really think about that in your own personal timeline too. That also allows for time, you know, like Emily was saying, it is a competitive program, so you might be declined initially. That will just allow for time for you to perhaps reapply if you need to. And also really thinking about, you know, the fact that we're not the ones doing the payment processing. That comes from outside of our offices. And that can take a while. So really think about that 6 to 8 weeks for payment processing as well when you're taking that into consideration of when to apply. Another helpful hint and something that we love to offer is that we're here to review draft applications. So if you would like, you can feel free to reach out to myself or to Emily to read a draft application, and we will happily send some feedback to you about that application before you click submit. One thing, like Emily was saying, with the other feedback requests on declined applications, this can take a while. We get a lot of requests. So definitely allow for several weeks for us to process that feedback. You know, if you're trying to apply tomorrow, don't send the application today and expect that we're going to be able to get to it, because we're probably not going to be able to, but we're happy to do it. All right, real quick here in our last 5 minutes, we're coming down to the home stretch. Just to review quickly, Smart Simple. Smart Simple is our grants platform. You can access it by going to marylandarts.smartsimple.com. We do, all of our applications have to come through Smart Simple. So if you are not already registered within Smart Simple, you do need to set yourself up for a profile. And to do that, you can, once you go to marylandarts.smartsimple.com, you can click the little blue register button in the lower left-hand corner. That's going to then pop up a menu, and you select if you are an independent artist or if you're associated with an organization. It gives you a couple of different options. You would just select whichever one is correct for you, and it will walk you through a couple of prompts, just asking some basic information, contact information, email address, things like that. Once you're all set up, you would then put in your email address and your password to log in, and you're going to come to your dashboard, which would look something like this. You would want to go to the My Applications section and look for the Opportunities option. It's going to have a number above it. In this screenshot here, it says 2. That might vary just depending on the time of year and what's available. But you would want to click on Opportunities, and then that will bring up a full list of all of the applications that you could apply for. For this case, you're going to want to look for Creativity Grant in the list, and then you're going to look for, there's a corresponding Apply Now blue button that's just right across from it, and you'll click that Apply Now button, and that is then going to open up the application for you. It's really important to, once you get to this point, you want to click the Save Draft button. This is what kind of activates the application and makes it live for you. So if you don't do this part, you're going to have some issues. You're not going to be able to enter in information. So make sure you click Save Draft. Everything then should be activated, and then the program is really going to walk you through the application from this point. So it's going to bring you to the next section, what you need to enter in. You'll see the narrative boxes for those 3 questions, and it will just kind of bring you through the whole thing all the way to the end, which would be your electronic signature at the end there. We do always recommend, this system does not auto save. That's an important thing to know. So make sure that you click Save Draft periodically so you don't accidentally lose anything. You know, if you lose Wi-Fi all of a sudden or something like that, we want to make sure that you save all of your information. So click that periodically throughout. And once you're good to go ahead and click that blue Submit button. Once you click that, you're locked in. So everything is going to be submitted to us then for review. So don't click that until you are absolutely ready for that to be sent in for review. But other than that, that's pretty much Smart Simple. It's pretty straightforward, but of course we can help if you run into any technical challenges or anything like that. And we are here with like 1 minute to go. So, so we're going to go ahead and have our email addresses here. Hopefully you have heard throughout that we are here to help however we can. We're here for feedback. We're here to answer questions. We can meet. We can do virtual meetings, calls, texts, emails, whatever works for you. We are happy to help with anything. And I think there's a couple of questions in the chat, but I think Emily's gotten to those.
Yep, I think so. Yeah, it looks like it. Great.
All right. Well, everyone, I'm sorry that we have run out of time for questions and answers as we have about 30 seconds here. But of course, if you have a specific question, please feel free to email us, either or both of us here, and we're happy to discuss that on a one-on-one basis. Emily, anything else to wrap us up?
Nope, I think that's it. Thanks everybody for joining us for the past hour and learning a little bit more about the Creativity Grant. And we look forward to hearing from you and all the great things that you're doing in your community.
Great.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much, everyone.